Back on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. Brian Schaaf joined via Zoom from all across Wayne County, Ohio. That's near Amish country and Cleveland, all the same. Chef Tony Biggs, meat scientist Diana Clark. Guys, how you doing?
Fantastic.
Nice.
How are you?
You know, I am good. It's always this period after the holidays that it's like you kind of need motivation to get going because we've survived Christmas, we've survived the New Year's, and now we've got to find the strength to carry on in 2022. This time of year, right? One of the things that we pride ourselves on with this podcast is we assume that most of the people listening probably already know a thing or two about cooking, a thing or two about meat. We like to take you on that deeper dive. This is one of those topics we're going to talk about today that I feel like a lot of people have a general knowledge of at least, but maybe don't have that rabbit hole knowledge that we want to take you on. We're talking about braising, which by definition, and I had to read up on this, I feel like sometimes we talk ourselves in circles over what is braising. Braising really is, I found a definition from Bon Appetit that said, at the end of the day, braising is literally just gently cooking meat in liquid. Would you agree? I mean, there's more to it, but like, yeah.
You're close. Simply.
Yeah, you're close. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people will be like, well, you have to sear it. You have to do all these things. Like, yes, but
you know what? You got a career in culinary after that statement. Really? You know that?
I appreciate that. I'm on the eating end of things. That said, braising is one of those things. I've always thought, that if you have a piece of meat, right? And if you watch like Chopped, if you watch any of these, quick fire TV shows, right? If you have a piece of meat in front of you and you don't know what to do with it, I always feel like there are like three things you can do with it. You can beat the snot out of it, bread it and fry it, right? Schnitzel it, right, if you will. You can smoke it low and slow, or you can braise it. And no matter what, you're going to like the outcome, no matter whether it's eye of round, no matter whether it's bottom round from an ostrich. Like it's going to be pretty good. I mean, let's talk a little bit about braising.
I have to give all my braising techniques to my mentor, Klaus Friedenreich, okay, back in my culinary days. And he has credentials. So not only was he an instructor at Cordon Bleu Academy in Orlando, but he was also captain of the 1980 Culinary Olympic team for the United States of America that won gold in Frankfurt, Germany that year. So I give him a lot of credit because he always talked about braising, being German and growing up. And his grandma, he would tell us stories about braising in the war days and thickening sauces with ginger snap cookies and all that. But he really had the technique down for braising. So I'm going to share my little tidbits with you guys and gals out there and on our podcast. And, I follow 4 basic steps, but really the most important step I found that some chefs fail on is they just want to get things into a pan real quick and turn the oven up to 400 degrees, cover it with foil, and then let it go. Well, that's all well and done. And eventually, yes, it'll be cooked, chefs. It will. But is that what you really want? Or do you really want to kind of go low and slow on some of these, cuts that are very, very tough, right? So for me, the best results is not allowing the braising liquid to actually boil, but to simmer on the lowest setting that you can possibly have. Between 275 degrees, right? But I swear, some chefs, they swear on even a lower temperature to 200 degrees. It's kind of like sous vide. If you think about sous vide now, that's entered the culinary world right now. It's the same process without the bag or without the water, right? So if you follow those steps, braising is another step of sous vide, right? It's low and slow. And it's kind of what the love you put into it, right? So I got 4 basic points here. So step 1, you have to sear your meat, right? Ladies and gentlemen, you have to sear it. You don't throw it in there raw and just hope like for the best, right? You need to sear it on both sides. And by doing that, we season the meat on all sides, right? We season salt and pepper, whatever. Pour, put oil into a heavy, very hot pot, like a Dutch oven, excuse me, or Le Creuset. Set it on medium heat and then add the meat. Do not crowd the pot. Very important step. Do not crowd the pot. It's not a rock concert, all right, where you're getting tons of people in there. Let the meat breathe. I always tell people, let it breathe. Keep it far apart. It's not a rock concert. Okay, just don't stuff everything in there and let it go, because it's going to turn into like boiled meat, right?
It's meat social distancing. Really.
It's meat social distancing. I love
like
that.
it. I like that.
Social distancing, right? Don't crowd the pot. Take time to make the beautiful color all around the meat. All right. Once you have achieved that, you take out the meat, take it out of the pot, and we're going to make a mirepoix. Okay, so what is a mirepoix? A mirepoix is chopped onions, celery, and carrots. Okay, and this is giving flavor to the stock that you're going to be building here, right? So this is step 2. You add it to the drippings left behind in the searing, and you stir that frequently. I like to brown them so they're nice and seared, and usually on medium heat. And you're caramelizing, you're browning those. You're not scorching those ingredients, so you're just giving a brown color. Now, what you do is now you're going to deglaze your pan, right? And by adding braising liquid. As Brian said, you can braise with any liquid. I sometimes braise with apple juice or soy sauce, but I like beef stock. Let's just concentrate on beef stock, all right, or chicken stock. By deglazing, you're getting all that fond, okay, all that buildup, all that beautiful stuff on the bottom of the pan. You're deglazing that. You're enriching that into your 2B sauce at the end of the day. So deglazing is very important. A lot of people use red wine or white wine in deglazing. Okay, you're scraping any of those brown bits from the bottom. Those are the best ones. And those are we call flavor bombs. Okay, bombs of flavor. When they dissolve in the cooking, they will enrich the entire dish. Beautiful, very important deglazing. Okay, we have step 4. We return the meat back into the pot with the juices, and now we're going to add a little bit of broth. The meat should not be submerged. Okay. You're braising, not boiling. Okay, so those beef shanks, okay, not adding too much broth will dilute the sauce. You don't want that. Bring the liquid to a simmer. Bring the liquid to a simmer, then cover and slide into a 325-degree oven. Okay, those are perfect, right? So now you've seared your meat, you've added your mirepoix, you deglaze, and now you braise. Deglaze, and now you braise. Okay?
I like that.
You like that. So
if you deglaze with wine, and then you help yourself. It becomes a deglaze braise in a haze.
Well, you're always remember, a good chef is going to save some of that wine while he's watching the pot braise, right?
Chef, I had a wise chef a long time ago told me, what kind of wine do you cook with? Any kind that you would drink with, because
exactly,
let's be real, let's not forget about your cut.
Okay, but you know what? If you're doing a 1929 Petrus, I think we got a problem there. All right, yeah, we definitely have a problem there. I think you would be banned from the gastronomique of society of Le Chien de Rétissio. All right. Yeah.
You know what though? Let's talk. So at its core, right? You talk about Klaus Friedenreich, who, of course, that's as German as they come, right? I mean, that's something more German than Klaus. But this is a French, like this. I was like, this is the core of French technique, right? I mean, you go back. I mean, they've been braising for thousands of years, right? This is probably one of the oldest cooking techniques that exists is, slowly cooking in liquid, right?
Well, it is because, a lot of folks can't afford those prime middle meats that we're all enjoying, tenderloin, ribs, strips, and you're taking those secondary cuts of meat like the chuck roll and the round and those things that take a long time to cook. And grandmas and moms have perfected the braising before we're even born, right? Diana Clark and Brian. I mean, don't you know that every household has a slow cooker or a Dutch oven, that all of a sudden Sunday dinner's coming out and, it's fall apart, flaky, and just absolutely beautiful, melt in your mouth, right? Yeah. It's braising. It's part of the braising.
That's outstanding. Well, Diana, if you could talk about this, I feel like what is happening inside the meat, right? We say it's done on tougher cuts. You can braise anything, though. You could braise a tenderloin, but maybe it's probably not the wisest use of your economics going on, right?
Well, you have to realize when you're using those cuts from the round and the chuck, those are the cuts that are going to have more of that collagen content in there. And that's really what you're focusing on. They're targeting on those structural proteins to really break down the meat, because when you start to break those down, that collagen starts to gelatinize and becomes this ooey gooey goodness that adds into a lot of flavor. So we use those cuts from the chuck and the round because they usually have more of that collagen buildup, just basically because those are the locomotive muscles. So you want to really, like how Chef Tony said, you want to really exploit that flavor and capitalize on it. So we have the slow roasting you think about in terms of barbecue. I mean, that is a slow roasting application, very similar in terms of braising. However, we're allowing that stuff to drip off and we're not collecting it. That's the beauty of the braising part, where we're actually holding it in and keeping it. I mean, if you save a lot of those juices, you end up, when you put it in the refrigerator, I mean, it shakes. It's like Jell-O. That's essentially what you have. You can utilize that later in other dishes too. You collect that, pop it into other places, because there's a lot of protein. There's a lot of protein in there for you, but it's just a lot of flavor for you to use. And there's some arguments of when that collagen starts to break down. It's really, we haven't really pinpointed anything perfectly. And that's because it's really hard to actually know which we're measuring and how we're measuring it, in terms of there's a lot of different proteins that you're going to try to collect and see what comes out. But they say usually between that like 140 and 160, we start to see that breakdown starting to occur. So when you hold it in those lower temperatures, you're going to allow that to break down a little bit more. If you do it really fast, you're going to get to that end temperature before you've gotten the best out of that collagen, gotten the most protein out of there, essentially. So
that's interesting. So the amount of collagen, I think you already touched on it. You look at like a braised shank or something like that. I mean, that is a really unique flavor and texture that I feel like, we talk about, ribeye, strip loin, tenderloin, all these things. They don't have that. I mean, there are things that you'll get by braising these that if you were to buy a more expensive cut, isn't going to be as good.
No, definitely not. And you have to think about too, it's like you can physically see all that connective tissue and everything within the shank itself, but there's a lot of that structural protein that you can't see. I mean, you need to be able to look under it under a microscope in order to see it, because every single cell has that component. Every single muscle fiber is going to have that in there as well. So there's definitely a lot to it, but the more collagen content you have, you're definitely going to have more of that gelatinous flavor coming off of it. So the shank is one that's extremely rich when it comes to that. And you also have a good amount of fat in there as well too, that you can add into the cooking process, and kind of just makes me start to salivate thinking about this right now, thinking of one of Chef Tony's shanks wrapped in a puff pastry currently, and kind of excited.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you.
Well, and this time of year, there's an old Mitch Hedberg joke about, something about Cinnabon incense candles, right? To make his roommate a little excited, right? I feel like they should make an incense candle of braised beef, because
Oof.
that is the smell of January in Northeast Ohio, right? I mean, sometimes like there's nothing that really makes you feel a little more at home than that. It makes you feel good all over, right?
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, one of the best tips, and I can't remember who I initially heard suggest it, but Tony and I discussed it a little bit this morning, was when you braise, you get this liquid, right? And that's got a lot more purposes than just what you cook it in. Tony, talk about saving that liquid, man. When you start a braise in the future with braising liquid that you've already braised in once, I mean, that's like a mother culture, isn't it?
Diana Clark just put it perfectly. Okay. You're breaking down that collagen, and virtually what you're doing is you're making a stock out of those collagen. So think about it from that standpoint. If you were going to make a beef stock, chicken stock, a fish stock, all right. So now you have captured all those beautiful flavors in your pot with your vegetables, with your meat. And now you don't even know what you have because there's so many things in that pot. But if you took those veggies out, that beef out, and you refrigerated that, like Diana was mentioning, the next day you're going to have Jello, okay? Literally Jello, all right? And if you strain that out, okay, really nicely, then you really have Jello, all right? That has thickened up, and you do not throw that away. That is like gold, okay? Now, you can freeze that. You can put it into an ice tray and make ice cubes, whatever you want to do, all right? We don't do that, but I've seen people do it, okay? It's funny, and then, it's not really funny. It's kind of useful. If they just pop one out of the ice cube, out of the ice tray, put it in their sauce, martini, whatever they want, okay? They got it. But I love that is just gelatinous. You've done something brilliant, really, chefs and cooks. You've done something brilliant when that becomes very gelatinous. But I'm going to show you now, not show you because I wish we could. I wish we had our own show, but we're going to braise to the next level here because Brian and I were talking about this morning. How do you take that braise to the next level? Meaning, okay, I've got all these overcooked vegetables, right? I don't want to serve those. I want to serve something fresh. Okay, very simple. About 15 minutes before your meat has been cooked, you prep a few more vegetables like root vegetables, potatoes, fennel, all right? You add that to the braising liquid, all right, about 15 minutes before they're done. And in 15 minutes, you have crispy, beautiful vegetables, all right?
Ooh, I like that.
You like that? Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So they're not overcooked. There's one thing I didn't really like when I grew up was overcooked carrots in a stew. Okay. And then I would learn from the tray that if you just take 10 or 15 minutes, you could even sear them in the oven just a bit, just to brown them up, and then put them back into your stew or whatever you're braising, and you got really nice crisp vegetables. Okay. Now let's go back to, if you didn't want to do that, I've seen folks where they just take an immersion blender, they take the meat out and they blend the whole vegetable stock together, and now they have a gravy, okay? And then they put that on the meat. So they can just take a hand immersion blender right into the pot. Give me some background, Brian. Okay, a couple of times. Yeah, a little bit of whole butter to make it rich, a little splash more of wine, a little beef stock, so it's not too thick, and you got a beautiful sauce to go over your meat.
And you get vegetables within there too. I mean,
and you got your pureed vegetables.
All of a sudden you're a hook nut.
I personally like taking those vegetables that we initially cooked with the meat, take those out. I will throw them in the hot oven again to crisp them up. I don't waste them, but I like a nice sauce. I like a sauce. I finish it with red wine and butter, and it's silky, and it coats the back of the spoon. A lot of people, if you just put a spoon in there, if it coats the back of it, it's perfect.
Okay.
And I try not to use any cornstarch or flour in my sauces. I make sure they're el natural because of the collagen. Okay, because of the collagen, right? If you reduce it just a little bit and make sure it coats the back of the spoon, you got a home run.
Excellent. Tony, you touched on it already, but root vegetables are something near and dear to your heart. This time of year is like their time to shine, right? What are you pulling that is I guess non-typical when you think about root vegetables and what most people cook with?
Well, I love parsnips. Oh my gosh, I love parsnips. And you can do so much with roasted parsnips. If you take some red potatoes or purple potatoes, I really love fennel. I love fennel a lot. It's crispy. You can slice it very thin and just roast it first, about 15 minutes into a real hot oven. Beets, roasted beets that are not mushy. You can just, peel them. You can put them into a hot oven again with a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper. And then, like 15 minutes before your meat is fork tender, you can place those into your stew or whatever to get a little bit of sauce on there, and then you got something really magical. Serve that with polenta or like a risotto, a mushroom risotto with farro. That's very different. An ancient grain. So, that beautiful roast, that's been braised, those vegetables and that beautiful sauce, a glass of red wine, voila.
Excellent. All right. For both of you, I have a question. So, I'm the least culinarily apt person in this group, but I will tell you because I've done both. Braise a chuck roll, braise like a bottom round or a top round, or even an eye of round. You can taste the difference because I assume the chuck roll always comes out better. I assume because obviously it has far more intramuscular fat inside of it. If we're talking about the two, obviously you go to the meat case, or honestly, if you're in a restaurant, right? Lots of chefs are playing this game now that I've noticed that it's like, you know what? I'm going to figure out what my specials are going to be this week based on, what's advantageous from a pricing standpoint, right? We're not going to get locked into one thing, switch this out, try something else. Right. But help me, give me some ideas on how to kick those round braising items up a little bit, because I always feel like they're missing something.
Well, go ahead, Di.
So the one thing I'll say really quick off the bat is fat. So that is definitely, it's not even definitely there's I'd say the intramuscular fat, the marbling is still there. It's the intermuscular fat, that seam fat that we really don't have, because the round is basically these very large muscles. I mean, there's a big top round, an eye round, a bottom round, and it's all a singular muscle. Versus you look at the chuck, a chuck roll is multiple little muscles put together. So around every single one of those muscles, you have more of that fat. And that's really that added flavor that we get in those cuts as they start to break down that we're missing from the round. So really having that fat source is key. Also, the muscle fibers are a lot longer in your round cuts versus your chuck cuts. So if you go to shred it apart, it's going to be these long strands. I honestly would suggest kind of chunking them up before you would go and do the braising. That way you can even get it browned on all sides, trying to add some flavor in there. Brown it in a little bit of fat might be beneficial, but that's definitely that from a science standpoint, those are the opposite ends of the carcass. So definitely have some variations in fat, definitely.
And to add to that, Di, if you do this little test, if you want, and sometimes I do this, where after I'm braising, after I know that the meat is cooked, I'm gonna remove the meat from the pot, but then I'm gonna stick the whole pot into the refrigerator, okay, overnight, And then when you come back the next day, what you're going to see is that layer of fat that Di is talking about, right? It could be like a half an inch. You can just put some gloves on or a spoon and remove that fat, and voila, you now have the sauce. But you can see how much fat Di is talking about from at least the chuck roll.
Excellent. One last question here. There's something magical. Maybe it is. Maybe the answer is it's magic, right? Certain foods, pastas, lasagna is a great example of it. Like pot roast, right? There's something special about pulling that out, letting it cool down, and then bringing it back up to temperature, and it just eats so much better. Is there an explanation for this, or is this just it's the meat gods smiling down upon us?
So one thing that I'll say that is, I honestly have never compared a pot lasagna specifically from like hot versus cooled down and then reheated. But this is kind of a neat, fun fact. Every time, and this holds true for potatoes as well, every time you chill and reheat, you start to create these they're called resistant starch, where your body physically can't break it down. So maybe that's part of this chilling down process and kind of bringing it back up to temp. You're probably not heating it far enough that you still have a little bit more structure to it. So when you have a hot lasagna, all of the juices and stuff are still running and flowing. There are liquids coming out, versus one that's been chilled a little bit and heated back up. You can actually pull out a slice of lasagna versus having it just be mush all in the bottom. So I'd say that's kind of that behind the science behind that, is you get a little bit more of that structure to there than anything else. I don't know.
Is that why Mom always says it's better the next day?
I think so. It's healthier for you. You get more fiber in your diet.
I just know, that's how Garfield always ate his lasagna, right? It always came off in a nice piece, right? Was not running out of the pan.
Yeah, it's a hard trick.
Oh, that said, before we turn you loose, right? And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Braising, right? There's lots of cuts out there. I would honestly, if you were to say, what is the one thing that you spend most of your time doing in general terms, I would say we are always trying to introduce cuts that people don't have much experience into their vernacular, right? Diana, you and I were just in Chicago. We did a dinner at Chicago Culinary Kitchen, talking about a lot of those unique offcuts, right? What are some offcuts that that people should know about that are going to be unbelievable from a braising application? Go.
Mock tender.
Mock tender.
Mock tender. A lot of collagen, a lot of flavor. Great item to braise. Very good price point as well.
I was going to say, and the price is generally pretty delightful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a big piece of meat.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a tenderloin. It kind of looks like an eye of round, right?
That's what I'd say. It tapers down like a tenderloin, same size as the eye of round, pretty much.
Yeah. Interesting.
Tony's made a very good pho with the mock tender before. Big fan.
Yeah, that's something definitely. The mock tender, and also I learned this from the Chinese. Actually, they love brisket, and I'm not sure if it's really braising, because they just put the whole brisket into like a hot sauce, like a hot pot with tons of spices. But man, when that comes out and you add that to noodles and bok choy and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, wow, I'm telling you, it's unbelievable, magical. From a price point, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, but it's brisket, right?
It's brisket.
Who doesn't love brisket,
right?
Wow.
And brisket has so much fat as well that, like, I feel like you're going to get some really good things dripping off of them. All right.
Oh, yeah.
let's talk about that real quick, right? That braising, right? You try all these different applications. Obviously, everybody has like a crock pot or something like that. Most people have some sort of cast iron-y thing as well. But then, there's also the Instapots, which are out right now, which of course is just kind of a modern pressure cooker, right? But if you take the same piece of meat and you do one in a traditional braise and you do the other one in a pressure cooker environment, there is a huge difference in the end product. At least I've always felt there's a huge difference in the end product. It's almost like you can't rush that pot roastiness. I mean, would you agree? Or am I doing it wrong, Chef?
No, you can't rush. Remember at the beginning of this discussion, for the best results, we try not to bring the liquid to a boil. It's actually a simmer. It's a lowest setting of liquid. It's a bare simmer. And that's what is going to, I use this analogy when you're doing short ribs, and chefs, you can attest to this. When you're braising too fast, that meat will fall right off the bone. I've done it before. I'm guilty of it. Okay. You can tell that meat has separated from the bone. Not that's not a bad thing, but from a presentation standpoint, and when you want a center of the plate, 5-star presentation where that meat is still attached to the bone, there's only one meaning: you braise it too fast, and then you had boiling liquid.
Excellent.
So to answer your question, what was the question again?
You can't fake it, right? You can't rush that process.
You cannot rush. Yeah. No, you cannot rush. No,
it's
not at all.
Called low and slow for a reason.
Yeah. But what's going on, just out of curiosity, in a pressure cooker?
I mean, you think you're adding, it's not just heat that's breaking it down. You're legitimately adding pressure to break it down, which is also causing other proteins to break down as well. So that's why you get those different textures, because you're breaking down more than just that collagen. You're taking it kind of to the next level on what you're denaturing.
So use this analogy. Colonel Sanders, perfect analogy. Colonel Sanders invented fried chicken. Okay. It used to take him 12 minutes in a deep fat fryer. Okay. By using a pressure cooker, he got it down to 8 minutes, meaning Diana just nailed it. You are once that pressure cooker is going on, it takes less time, but everything in that pot is being cooked quicker, right? And this is why you could sell so much chicken in 8 minutes compared to 12.
But have you sacrificed anything? Because it's not going to be a perfect replication, right?
Well, I personally like Popeyes better, but anyway.
It's because they use beef fat to fry everything.
Yeah, and McDonald's took away the tallow from their French fries years ago, and
we wonder why the world is in the state that it's in now, right?
Exactly.
It all started with Colonel Sanders and McDonald's removing beef tallow. So makes sense to me. That said, on that note, I'm kind of giddy. I want to braise something up. I might do it this weekend, because I might just put on a braise, even if I'm not hungry, just because by the time it's done, who knows, why not? We'll give it a go. That's it. If this is your first time listening to the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand, you can catch us across all of your major podcasting platforms: Google Play, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It's the little purple icon. That's the one. If you have a second, go in there, leave us a star review, preferably 5. Leave us a note just to say, hey, I saw. Actually, I don't know if you guys saw it. We had a note from our pals at Fox Brothers on there not too long ago in the review.
Oh,
yeah,
I miss those guys.
Makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, right? So if you leave us a review there, not only will we give ourselves a little hug on the inside, but we'll probably talk about it here too, especially if it's real funny. So that said, we appreciate you for tuning in. Please give it a like, give it a subscribe, follow us across all of your social media channels, or visiting certifiedangusbeef.com. Chef Tony Biggs, meat scientist Diana Clark. Guys, let's go braise some meat, shall we?
Start the new year off right.
Giddy up. On that note, thanks for tuning in to the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand.